All right. Hello, welcome. The last day, the morning after the party. I'm glad you're all here. So this is an interesting talk. I often do talks where I'll say, like, here's all the new features. Here's a list of all the different things. Who here was at my talk yesterday where I kind of showed off a bunch of... So that was kind of a, here's all the stuff that's in the box. And what I kind of wanted to do for this is take a look at, here are some things I would do when I'm building a website. The team has to be, when they build these templates, they're very careful what they ship. They want to give you just enough so that you can get started, that you're not kind of left out there writing a ton of code on your own. But they don't want to give you too much code. They don't want to give you a bunch of code that's going to annoy you, that you'll have to delete. Also, any code that they ship, they have to maintain later, right? And so there's kind of this balance of trying to get just enough in the box and then also give you the freedom to kind of go and explore after that. So I wanted to take a look at what I would add if I was adding some stuff. So this is my one slide. I've got a gist, and if you look on gist and look for Jon Galloway, it's my most recent gist. And I've got just a ton of links and stuff, and it's kind of a long checklist. And what I'm hoping from this is that we can, that some of these things you'll learn and you'll say, hey, that's a good idea. I'm hoping a decent amount of others you'll look at and you'll say, that's a terrible idea, which means it's good it's not in the box. And I would also love to hear your ideas. This is a small enough group. If you've got ideas, throw a hand up. There's somebody with a mic, or you can just let me know and I'll repeat it. And we'll take a look. Maybe we'll add in something and I'll learn something too. Sound good? From your, just for reference from me, who here is like way up to date on everything with ASP.NET? They've got ASP.NET Core 2.2 Preview 2 installed. All that kind of stuff. Okay, there's a few. Okay, cool. Who here has like basically no knowledge, like they'd be scared if they were told they needed to write an ASP.NET Core app? Somebody? There's a few people, I hope. Good. Okay. So we've got a balance. Keep that in mind. If you're like super advanced and you're like, what are you talking about? Why are you wasting my time? There's some people here that are new to this. And then also, slow me down if I'm rushing through a bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start just kind of, hey, showing up to work Monday morning. I've got a new project to build. It's a mini site. It is a site with a, I'm kind of modeling this after what we did for, or what we do for our workshops in general. So there's this ASP.NET Core app workshop. And I originally was just planning on doing file new project web app. And I realized there's a little bit more that I wanted to kind of start thinking about, that was a little too simplistic. So this ASP.NET Core web app, what we do is we build a front end, which is just a web app. We build like some DTOs, some just kind of standard stuff in a .NET standard library. And then we build a back end that has APIs. And then as part of this, like this past week, at the workshop, I also tacked on a Blazor front end and stuff. So part of the reason I did this was to start thinking about what do we do with calling, like configuring API calls and multi-tier stuff. Another thing is, it's very easy to start building out an application and then your folder structure is all wrong because you only have one project in it. So who here builds solutions that always have more than one project in it? That's right. So I wanted to be a little bit more real world. Who here like regularly has projects with like, or solutions with over 50 projects in them? Okay, that always like freaks me out because I like to keep it small and have like NuGet packages for sharing and stuff, but I know real world people are, doing bigger things, so cool. So as a just kind of general reference, this thing here, I'll add a link to that gist so it'll show up. But this is this ASP.NET Core app workshop, and was anyone here at the workshop this week? Okay, it's all online. And this is something where if you want to kind of learn ASP.NET Core in more detail, it's all written out as like a walkthrough. It's a tutorial, and you can go through and, it'll say, now create this class, and now you're going to configure it, and so you're going through and building an entire application. All right, so let's do this. I've got a few that I'm going to refer to, but I'm actually going to just do File New. And there's a few different ways to structure a solution when you're building something out. There's two different questions that I think of right away. One is, do I want to, if I'm going to be putting it up on GitHub or in source control, do I create it in the repo first and then clone an empty repo and then build my thing and push to that? Or do I start building locally and then I go out and create the repo? Show of hands, which do you prefer? Do you prefer to build locally for a while and then create a repo and throw it up there? I'm guessing that's kind of more likely. I try to do that as early as possible, though. It's way too easy to code for a while and then something happens. My laptop died this summer and I lost some work, and it reminded me that it's like always be pushing code, right? So there's a few ways that you can go through and configure a multi-project solution. One way that we've got in here is command line. You can go through and you do .NET add, and you kind of build it from command line. Here's another thing you can do is when you create a project, you can go in and there's a thing in here, other solution types. No, where is it? It's hiding away. I may skip over it if I can't find it. It's there it is. Blank solution. Anyone know about this already? This is actually not that common of a one. So I'm going to call this Sydney. Cool. All right, so we'll create that blank solution. Then I can go through and add projects to this. Part of the reason I'm doing this is just to be specific about where I want my solution files. I hate it when I create a project and then I add other projects in, and then my solution file is nested in a project and all that kind of stuff, right? So now I'm going to add a few different things to this. And we'll be popping over regularly to this checklist. So we are at setup solution. So I'm gonna do that. So I'm going to add in two other projects in here. So I'll do add new project. And of course, I could do this all command line, .NET add project, etc. So here we'll go there. We'll do ASP.NET Core Web App. We'll call this Web App. And I am doing this. I want to do this with ASP.NET Core 2.1. It in some ways kind of breaks my heart because I like doing all the new and shiny, but I want to show you something that's actually shipping code. So I'm going to go with that for now. So I'm going to go with, this is not such a difficult decision anymore. Normally I'd have to go like, well, do I want authentication or not? As I showed in my talk yesterday, you can scaffold and add authentication in later. So we'll keep it lightweight and not add authentication. We'll do that. And then I'm going to create a few other projects and add them in here too. We'll throw in that DTO project, an API project, and breaking with tradition, I'm actually going to even throw in a test project. So let's do add project. Need to click on solution. Cool. All right, I know this is exciting. We'll move on to the next fun stuff in a second. So now we'll do an API. All right, cool. We'll start with that there. So now we've got our kind of standard thing. Now, step 2 on this, and some of this actually I've gotten through just kind of running through this a few times and trial and error and saying, oops, this would bug me if I did this. So the next thing I actually want to do is add in a global JSON. So the reason for that is if I go, I've got .NET Core 2.2 Preview 2 on here. And this is, I think, pretty regularly, this is something where I'm experimenting. I'm working with multiple different versions, and I actually would like to manage my versions separately for this. In this case, I'm going to be building with ASP.NET Core 2.1, and there are some things that break if I don't do that. So how I'm going to do that is using SDK, .NET SDK list. So this is a cool project. It's just a neat open source thing. It's pretty quick install. Is anyone using this, .NET SDK list? This is pretty handy for managing multiple versions. So it's something that it's not yet a global tool. I would expect it will be soon, but it's a super quick install. And what's neat with this is I can go, then in this application, I can say .NET SDK 2.1.402. So it just writes that out. So now let's take a look. I end up opening usually Visual Studio Code and Visual Studio, which is a little goofy, I realize, but sometimes some just seem kind of more, appropriate. So anyhow, yeah, there it is. I've got my global JSON, so that's cool. Where are we at now? So let's go to, so this is an interesting one. I asked around, and a lot of people recommended adding directory.build.props. Who here adds that to like everything they do? Okay, not many people. Cool, so we'll check that out. So directory.build.props is kind of neat. What you can do there is you can add an override that's going to be merged in to your all your build files. So here, let's go over here, and I'll grab this one and we'll drop it in. This one is a very, very simple one, but the idea hopefully is then if there's other stuff you need to configure, you can do it. Looks like I'll need to drag and drop it. Cool. So I'll put this in the root. I end up navigating a lot of folders pretty regularly, so there's a lot of tricks. There's the window, left arrow, right arrow. You can always, like if I'm in a folder, I can do cmd dot, and that'll pop open a command line in that window. And then if I am in command window and I want to open up the directory, I can do start dot, and that'll do the reverse. So that's pretty handy. So if I'm hopping around and doing that, that's how it's happening. All right, cool. So now when I go in and let's take a look at what's in that directory.build.props. So that one is just this. I've just opted into a few things. So I've done things like set my name and company. You can also do things like here, I'm opting into the latest language version. So this takes advantage of C# 7.3 features. There's not a whole lot in here. There's some more advanced tuple support and stuff. But this is kind of just a standard place where I can manage things. If I did want to set like language version or version all my assemblies in one place, I can set the version number and stuff there. So cool. All right, so we are trucking through. We have done these first three. So now I'm actually going to go out and push this to GitHub. All right, let's have a vote. Who votes that I create the repo and then push it versus the other option, I guess, is push from inside Visual Studio. Who wants me to push from inside Visual Studio? Cool. All right, there you go, sir. All right, who would like me to go to GitHub, create a repo, and push command line? All right, we'll do that. So part of the reason that I like to put repos on, push stuff to a repo quickly is so that I can start getting CI going. I'm not going to have time probably to set that up today. But I usually do set up stuff with Azure, like the Azure CI build from GitHub. And just, even if it's just so I can ping someone else on my team and say, hey, check out this site or whatever. Also, if there are going to be any problems with deploying the site and running it live, I want to know early. So that's something where I can just start doing that way at the beginning and save some time. So here I've already, I've got some code. I don't have it in a command line, so I'm gonna, or I don't have it in Git yet, so I'll do git init. Cool, so then we can go to, I just go through and do all this sort of stuff here. So I'm gonna do git add dot, and this is the one thing I wanna copy there. So, what happened there? Because I'm running. Stop that. That's awesome. Not sure why it would be running. Huh. May have to kill my server. Yeah, good plan. So now I have to get in my, I actually am going to be lame and add this via here. If anyone walks out, I'll understand. So this is kind of neat, though, that you can go through and do this. This will hopefully, oh, look at that. So when I did this earlier today, it actually created that get ignore and stuff for me, which is kind of nice, so I don't have to mess with that syntax. So I think I can do this now. Cool. All right, so there we go. Now we'll push it. My rule of thumb is anything over about 50 characters, I'm going to copy and paste. Cool. All right, I do like to, and I know there's a lot of different workflows, and some people are really kind of dogmatic about which one. I actually like to hop between all of them. I like to go command line, I like to use the Visual Studio tools, and I like to use VS Code. And I feel like there's a lot of times where, sometimes if I'm doing like, I've got 100 files. I want to kind of go lightweight, and I'll use just VS Code for that. If I'm doing just a quick commit or something, I'll use command line, and then for kind of more like if I'm diffing or stuff like that, I'll use Visual Studio. So cool. There we are. So now we are open source developers, so that's exciting. My next step is going to have me probably still staying in here. So good. Add a license. So this is actually, I think, a pretty important thing to do. And even if I'm doing it for like a website that I'm putting up, some people will say, like, don't worry about a license, don't get all uptight about it. But really, if you don't create a license, you're not letting people use your code. People, if they're looking at open source code on the internet, well, if it doesn't have a license, it's not really open source, right? So there, I type in license, and here it gives me the option. It notices that and says, what kind of license. I'm going to go with good old MIT. It makes me feel smart. And we'll add that. Cool. And now we merge our own pull request. So this is something where, again, this is, I could obviously have created this file on my local machine. I like to use the tools there and actually have like a pre-populated MIT license and stuff. So cool, confirm merge, and then we'll wipe that branch, and then we'll pull it local. Awesome, okay, so there we go. Let's kill that. Let's go over here. So we've added a license. Now here's something where I'm going to go a little bit rogue. I built an ASP.NET Core application. However, in looking at some of the features and stuff that are in ASP.NET Core 2.2, there's a lot of stuff that I can start using now. And so what I like to do with that, and there's always trade-offs, but I like to kind of take a balanced approach and start pulling in some of that more advanced stuff early. So I'm going to, for instance, start using analyzers, and then I'll use some things like health checks and stuff like that. And again, that's partly because I like shiny things and I want to use the new features, but it's also because I know it's coming. And especially for a relatively small application like this or whatever, I've kind of thought through, I know they're shipping at the end of the year, and I want to be able to, as soon as it goes live, hop onto 2.2. So it's easiest for me if I can start taking advantage of some of those features. So what I've done here is there's several analyzers that are available, and these are part of what's in the what's in the new release stuff. So here, if I go pop these into so I've got this one's the reference. This is when I ran through this before. This is the reference. You'll notice an interesting thing here, and this is going to come up later. The way that we reference ASP.NET Core as a reference now, it doesn't have a version. And that's because it's just managed for you. It's going to be whatever the ASP.NET Core version is that corresponds with the SDK and stuff. That can come back to bite you, though, because it is a versionless reference. So there's something you have to do there as far as like setting up health checks and stuff. OK, so I'm going to now go in and throw in these analyzers. I also am curious, Glenn, is this a horrible idea? Now, it didn't break anything. So I thought it was cool. But now, so we have 1 vote yes, 1 vote no. I'm on stage. I have the mic. I'm doing it. So here we're gonna pop this in. And so these ones I feel a little bit less worried about because they're analyzers. So analyzers are something that checks for best practices in my code as I'm developing. It's not something that I'm going to push it out onto the server and it's going to explode probably. Probably won't explode, right? So I'm doing it. So this is something where we're not going to write any real code where we'll get to the point where it's going to say, hey, your app sucks, and change your code. But I like to just put them in there. It makes me happy. Cool. So now we've got some code. We have not actually written any real code. So we can do .NET build. Just make sure it's all there. From back in the old day, you used to have to first do .NET restore on everything before doing .NET build. Now it's implied that you're going to do that. Now, one thing I also like to get set up early on is the whole kind of .NET watch workflow. So if I go to here, I could type just .NET run. And then it's going to run my app. And then if I kill it if I'm going to make changes to the code, I'm going to have to keep stopping it and then running it again and stuff. So there's another trick you can do where you can use .NET watch run. And what that'll do is it'll watch for changes in my code. And it'll, so my backend C# code, and it'll rebuild that. So it's got a file watcher hooked up to the build process. So then I really like that for kind of a quick process where I'm going through, I'm tweaking something, it may be some front end or some back end code, and I can keep refreshing, right? So that used to be something that took some setup because you had to install a NuGet package directly in each project that was using it. But now that's a global tool. So any project you're working on, that'll work with. So there's really nothing you have to set up there. OK, another cool thing here is .NET outdated. So this, again, is just something as part of the workflow. I like to regularly check. Oops, outdated. So this is a global tool. This is a community tool. And this is going to look at my project and say, are any of your NuGet packages out of date? So that's pretty helpful. So here I'm just doing it in that one web app. If I go here, so for the whole solution, it's going to check, and it's going to let me know. Now, again, since I just created this, it's not really likely to have any kind of problems. But if I was building, say, like a build.bat or something like that, I would want to include this, and I'd want to be looking at this and seeing if I have any outdated dependencies. So this is a global tool I've got installed. Here's it's going to tell me how to type it. Ugh. It's a .NET tool. So these are the global tools I've got installed. And I think they're fun to collect. They're free. You can go out, and Nate McMaster has a list of them. So these are all these global tools. And so this is something we're not going to do right now, but this is something where we may even, if we have like a build chain, these are things where we can start including into that, into like a build.bat, right? If you're interested in writing these are actually, this one will be a little bit longer, but they're actually relatively simple to do. You can look at source code for them out on NuGet, and they're relatively straightforward. It's just a console application, right? So cool. We have checked for that. Now we're going to actually start. And again, we're not like customizing the app. This is more the kind of setup stuff to make sure we've got a good solid start. So now I want to go through and start configuring functional tests. Functional tests are something that was just made available in ASP.NET Core 2.1. And the idea with this, there's of course unit tests. And unit tests, you point it at a function, a specific like unit of code, and you say, run this code with these input parameters, and I expect these output parameters. So that can be useful if you've got your code factored out into things where you've got like a very specific service, and you're checking, you know, if I submit this thing, do I have permission to do this, or if I, you know, am I running one specific block of code and getting the right thing out? The problem with that can be that a lot of time for web applications, they're not that useful, right? A lot of the time what you really want to know is, if I hit this web page, does it come up? Or if I browse to this URL, does it redirect to this other URL? So in the past, in order to do that, you had to do a decent amount of work. You had to either use something like Selenium, or you had to do some sort of like basically spinning up your app in order to test it. Problem with that is that it's heavyweight, and your tests take longer, and you end up not writing or using the tests. And so the idea with this feature, functional tests, is to make it easy for you to ping something like a page or an MVC URL and say, what do I get back from that? You know, if I hit this page, does it redirect to this other page? So you test more of that whole functional workflow, but it's a nice kind of balance between it's big enough to be useful, but it's small enough that it actually is all running in memory. It's not spinning up the entire website. So it's kind of it's a more kind of a low-key, in the middle sort of thing. So for this, I've actually gone through, and I've had to. This is where I'm just. This is both. It is cool, and it also is kind of a. It doesn't perfectly work right now. And so there's some problems with it. The problem is that I mentioned before that we're using this versionless ASP.NET Core web app thing. So if we go in here, we take a look at our CS proj, and this is just ASP.NET Core.app. So as of right now, if you create a test project and you point it at this project, it says, I don't know how to load that assembly. So this is something that will be fixed in 2.2, but as for right now, if you just create a new XUnit project and try and do functional tests, you actually have to go and tweak this. Has anyone run into this yet? Nobody here? Okay. Well, maybe maybe I saved you a half hour or something, because it's kind of a pain. So I'm going to go in and create a test project. All right, so we are creating an XUnit test project, and we'll call this webapp.tests. Cool. All right, so that is just a standard XUnit test project. Now, into this, we're going to add a reference to our web app. Add reference. There we go. OK, cool. So now at this point, we actually have to go in and edit our CS proj in order to define the version for that. So in the thing where we go, so here. So here's my reference, and I actually have to go in and add a specific reference to ASP.NET Core .app with this. So we'll throw that in. Part of the reason I'm spending some time mentioning this, you get crazy errors. Like it's not something like, oh, it kind of almost worked. It's like you get bizarre errors that don't make any sense. So now we're going to add a NuGet package so that we can do that, so that we can do the functional testing. And so that is Microsoft ASP.NET Core MVC testing. Is anyone using these? Working well for you? Yeah. Cool. All right. Hopefully, hopefully, what I want to do is just make you aware of a bunch of things. Again, you'll have other things where you're like, I can't believe you didn't do that thing and set up spriting or whatever. But some of this stuff I think is good to do from the beginning. And this is something where, starting in a project, I think this is worthwhile to get it set up, right? So cool. All right, so there we have that. Let me go over and check into this. So there we have our references. And now I'm going to go in and I'm going to set up a simple health check. So this is going to ping a few of our file new project pages, and it's just going to verify that it gets a response. Gets a 200 header. So cool. All right, we'll rename this to functional tests. And of course, over time, I'd probably break this down more and stuff. Wow, I just selected all in the Solution Explorer. That's scary. Cool. All right, so we'll have probably a few things to resolve. Maybe not. The astute watchers will note that I haven't committed for a while, which is kind of a no-no, so I really need to do that in a second. So I should be able to, I'll show you the tests in a second, but hopefully I want to verify that they actually run. And they all ran. Just kidding, they did not run. Okay, so, I may need to screw with my CS proj some more. So we do have, you know what, my web app was not created using the right template. Is that right? It's not a Pages application. It's a web API. Well, my tests actually did something very valuable for me. I did that all completely on purpose there to show you the value. Yeah, so let's go ahead and delete that one. Wow. That's amazing. Fortunately, I hadn't customized it much, so cool. You saw it here today, where functional tests. They're the best thing. Okay, there we go. See, I thought by calling it web app, that would just, by convention, I'd have to go in and delete it out or something. Cool. Everybody watch close. Make sure I do the right thing this time. Okay, and we should be good. Cool. Wow, I'm sold on this testing thing. Then we'll make sure that our tests run. Then we'll commit, and then we'll start hopping around. I think we'll look at health checks next after that. Oh, I may have to reset the reference. See about that. Let me verify I've got my tests. Let's add in a reference here. Build everything. Cool. Oh, I didn't have it in the right folder. And it's like stuck red now, which is kind of crazy. It's like everything I do is wrong from here on out. Wow. All right. So 5 failed. So we may screw with this for a bit more, and then we may move on because I don't want to debug tests too much here. Let's make sure that the website actually runs first. Okay. All right, so we have a functioning website. So if that doesn't work, I may hop over to this one that's actually working more. It may have to do with this CS proj, and I may not have copied all the stuff over. Set the version in the web. Oh, did I not set it to 2? Okay, let's see. So there's a few places I could do that. One is I could go in here. That is 2.1. Is that what we're talking about? I think that's it. All right, let's look. 2.1. Line 8. So I don't think I need to set it there. I think that from what I remember, I'm pretty sure that I needed to set it in here, but let's try it. I'm willing to go for that. So, and I can see what I had for my previous one. Yeah, so in the previous one, I actually did end up setting it in the in here. This is the XUnit test. So we'll take one more look at that. Let me look at this one. So here we have kind of my farther along solution. Let's compare them. So yeah, that just has .app. And so, and the web app itself runs. Let's take a look at the CS proj in here. So there I have 2.1.1.1. Oops. Okay. I'm going to be a goof and just copy all of those over. Yeah? All right. Build it all again. There's not a huge amount of code more in the next one, so we'll hop over to that in a second. I don't want to waste your time looking for a semicolon or whatever it is. So. If I was a fast typer, I would just switch over to my working solution, run the tests, and you'd be like, hey, look, actually, it all did work. Did anyone spot what changed? No? All right, this is one of those things where, like, so people make fun of engineers where they're like, how dumb is it to just run the same code over and over and expect it to, like, do something different? But I think we just all saw, right? I mean, what's that? So I don't think, maybe. I mean, it's possible. Let's look. Here's the unit test project. So the actual application still is, and there's another thing in there where you can go and say which exact .NET version am I running on. So I'm not sure, but I will tell you this: I gotta close this console window because the red is just killing me. So next, we're going to look at health checks, and so here's kind of our general plan, just so you kind of know where we're going. We're going to set up health checks. I'm going to show you quickly how to set up Mini Profiler. I may skip over that. Then I've got some front-end setup stuff. And then I'll just kind of walk through and point out some other kind of cool stuff. So I need to save a good, 5-ish minutes at the end to point out some other stuff. Part of where this all comes from is, does anyone here watch this ASP.NET Community Standup? So we do this every Tuesday. It alternates between US time between 10 a.m. and 3:45 p.m. So usually every other week works for you. My mental brain time math doesn't work. But one of these times should work for you. And here's this 8:45 a.m. That sounds good to me. So we've done 150 shows. So we just finished 4 years of these. We have all these kind of things where we talk to people on the dev team. And so as part of this, I always show off community links at the beginning. And so I've got this huge list of here's some neat things that people in the community are doing. Here's some recommendations. Here's some different ideas. And so that's part of what's influenced this. Cool, let's do health checks. So health checks is a feature that I believe was it's available to run on 2.1, but it's really going to be kind of shipping as a full-fledged feature in 2.2. So I can go in and add that using, so it's Microsoft ASP.NET Core Diagnostics Health Checks. So let's add that in. So the idea with, first I should commit some stuff too. Not in that cursed window. All right. Good. And I realize I skipped over probably the most important thing there, which is what those functional tests actually did. So let me show you that real quick. What this is doing is there's some startup stuff where it knows how to actually spin up your application. Then here, it's an XUnit test, so you can, all these different inline data, you can point a bunch of stuff at it. You say, run this test over and over, plugging all this different stuff into this URL parameter. So first go to the home page, then go to index, about privacy, contact, et cetera. And then for each of those, it's going to go in and it's just going to ensure it's got a success status code and that it's got a content header with so it's getting back a content header. So actually we can go in, let's delete one just for fun. So if I delete the contact page, cool. And then now let's do, so we should see now that one test fails, that one page doesn't come back. Cool. All right, so does not indicate success. We got a 404 on that page. So now I have two choices. One is I could fix that page, or two is I could decide I don't want that page, and then I can get rid of that. And now my test should work. So again, this is kind of a higher level, chunkier test that's going to say, for my entire page, do these, entire site, do the pages come up? All right, so this is a little bit different from a health check. So what a health check does is it is something where I can point something at my website and say, if these different things happen, return, yes, my site is healthy. So an example of where this would come in handy is you could say, if my site can reach the database, it's healthy. If my site, or conversely, if my site can't reach the database, it's unhealthy. Or if my site is missing the following configuration variables, it's unhealthy, that kind of stuff. So it's something where you can go through and make a list of in-code sort of stuff. What does my site need to have to be considered healthy? What's nice with that is these health checks are pretty standard for something like Traffic Manager in Azure. So you can have multiple instances of your site running. If one can't reach the database, it goes offline. Then the health checks immediately fail, and so then Azure sends everybody to the working instance of the site. So there's a lot of other stuff you can do with this. You can write your own kind of custom code for it, but like I mentioned, some of those kind of obvious things are, is the site even functional? And then if it is functional, does it have like the configuration values and that kind of stuff? And again, this is something where this is at runtime versus your unit tests are going to be at build time, right? As I'm writing my code, I'm running my unit tests, and then as my site's up live in production, I'm able to ping the unit tests or the health checks and say, is my site actually running? Cool. I'm sure that's going to go away because that's how things are working today. Okay, so now I'm going to go in. This is actually really easy to configure a health check. So I can go in and I can do, at the very basic level, I can say services.add health checks. And then down here, I can say app.use health checks. And then I can say return health. So what this is going to do is when I run my site, let's do it. So when I run my site and I browse to /health, I should get either healthy or unhealthy. So the default one that comes in the box just says, it's going to say healthy, right? And then there's other, so this would not return anything or whatever. If the site's offline, we ping this and it's not going to work. But then there's other things where you can go in, and so here's some of these samples where they go in and they say, here's one, for instance, where I ping a database, and does my database connection work? And it's going to do things like ensure, do I even have the right configuration for that and stuff? So here, it actually is running a database command, and I think it just does a select one or something. It's a very kind of lightweight sort of thing. And then there's others, here's so there's SQL, or that was the database connection. Here's a SQL connection. So there's all kinds of different ones you can do where you can say, like, this is how I've defined my application to be healthy, right? So now just to kind of, I do want to test around that health check to make sure my health check is actually working. So we'll just quickly pop one of those in there too. So we're doing a unit test verifying my health check. So this one is just a fact because we don't need multiple different ones going in. So I'll go in here. And we'll add one new method at the end. So this says, if I ping health, I'm expecting the result to be healthy. So so once this is done, we're going to look at some front-end stuff real quick. So one of the front-end things that I like to hook up is the current templates are running on Bootstrap 3, and the kind of it's like 3.3.7, I think. The new version is .NET, or is Bootstrap 4. Bootstrap 4 has some good stuff, Flexbox, and a lot of other kind of more updated stuff. And so in order to do that, what I would want to use is libman. and this is maybe a contentious thing, but there's a few different ways that you can handle your front-end dependencies. So if you are writing something like a very front-end heavy application, if you're using a lot of NPM packages, if you're doing, like a whole Angular thing and you need to transpile and you need Webpack and all that, by all means, you should be using that stuff. Like, I'm not, telling you shouldn't. If you are starting from scratch and you are going to be building a React or a Angular application, I'd recommend one of these templates because it wires it in with ASP.NET Core pretty well. So this uses JavaScript services and it's all tested and all that. So if you're building an application that's using React or Angular or whatever, definitely I would recommend using that. However, in this case, we're just using, I just want to throw Bootstrap in there. I'm not going to dev on Bootstrap. I'm not doing any kind of, I don't have less or Sass, or I don't have any of that other stuff. So from that point of view, I can go in and I can do manage client-side libraries. So this manage client-side libraries lets me go in and add other, I can point other libraries at it. So what this does is it actually gets, it will get those libraries off of, CDN. So here, if I went in and do this from here, let's say I wanted to add in client-side library. So this will say it can go and get it from like CDN.js or unpackage or from the file system, and I can point it at something. So let's say, for instance, I did want jQuery. Then I can go in, I'll say, boom, there's jQuery, and then I can also go in and pick specific files that I want, and it'll pop those into the root. So I think it's waiting a second due to Australia's tremendously fast internet, but don't have that one yet. What I do want to show you is how I've set this up. How I've set this up in another website that we just shipped recently. And so this is the .NET Foundation website. So this website has been a fun one. This is one that I kind of, it is a production website. It's something that I mostly run, and it's a good thing to kind of keep me honest and make sure that the stuff I'm telling you to do actually does work for me in production too. So this is a site where we did update it. So the site looks, it's ASP.NET Core 2.2. It's just last week we shipped this. So this is a Bootstrap 4 theme, and it's got, it's taking advantage of all the kind of bootstrappy stuff. So the way that we did that here, if I go in, and we'll do manage client-side libraries. And you'll see here, that's how I kind of, and in order to get this set up, I actually kind of went in and did some manual work there to do that. So that is kind of how I went in and set that up. If you are interested in updating an existing site, you can get this code. That site is actually out on GitHub. So you can take a look at the source code for it. So it's .NET Foundation website. And so the code that I set up for this, one is I set it up in libman, and then two is going in and configuring all this stuff. So this is an important thing to kind of spend some time on. It's definitely more than like the 5 minutes I have left here. But the idea is that you're setting up CDN and local links for these things. So when you're running locally, you may want to be using local copies of the files. When you're in production, you want to use the CDN versions, but if a fallback is available, you want to use it. So for instance, in this case, I'm using, here's Bootstrap coming from the CDN, and then this ASP.NET fallback stuff is pretty cool. What it does is it says, test for this class. So look for this class, check for the property position, and if make sure that it's absolute. So it actually loads that CSS, this is on the client. It's going to basically verify for the SR reader class, is position equal to absolute? If it is, fine, load it off the CDN. If not, then it gets it off of your local file system, or off of your server, right? So the idea is you get the benefit of CDN, but you get the fallback if the CDN is offline. So that's kind of how I set that up. So that is, this is my overly optimistic, like in an hour I was like, wow, we could do so much stuff, and it is time consuming, right? But here's some other things that I do want to kind of point out are neat and worthwhile. One is Mini Profiler. So Mini Profiler, is anyone using Mini Profiler? Mini Profiler, cool. So the idea is that you can actually profile and see the performance impact of things on your website. And it's it is a pretty lightweight install. It's built by the people at Stack Overflow, at Stack Exchange, and it's been designed so that they actually say you can run it in production. It shouldn't have a noticeable impact in performance. So there's that. For front-end stuff, Mads Christensen builds a ton of neat kind of front-end things. And so a few that I think are worthwhile. One is this bundler minifier. So this is if you have a good amount of like front-end code, CSS, JavaScript, it can actually bundle and minify it for you. So this is not a full like Webpack replacement or anything like that. It doesn't do things like compiling less in Sass, but it is a pretty good just kind of bundler minifier thing. Another kind of more advanced option is if you use this Web Optimizer, and what Web Optimizer does is it's actually middleware, and it's a little bit more fidgety to set up, but you can build out things like bundles and stuff. So this is something I'm keeping an eye on. It hasn't been quite as updated recently. Is anyone using this right now? Web Optimizer? So Mads builds a ton of awesome stuff. He's on the Visual Studio extension team now, but he builds a ton of stuff. But I'm always kind of checking, like, is this the newest? Because it comes at you fast. I'm including in this just several links on integration testing if you want to go deeper. Scott Hanselman wrote some posts on it explaining. Also health checks, there's links there. One thing that, the good next step into the API section is configuring actual like policies. So that's something where you can say, if it fails, if I call, do I call back? If I call and it fails twice, do I wait a bit before I call back a third time? That kind of thing. If you are interested in building a front end with Bootstrap, I've got some links in there. And then I guess one other last one I'd kind of like to leave with is this web developer checklist. So this is from Mads Christensen. And this is good, just any website on the internet should consider this stuff. So there's all sorts of things like, best practices, including things like page score, even stuff like including humans.txt and stuff on your site. So some of these things where it's just kind of, hey, did you check this thing? Is it localized? Is it, is the color contrast good? That kind of thing. So that's an hour. It's like I said, I had this. I also had a OneNote that was like, huge, and like trying to think of what you can actually get through in an hour is interesting. So hopefully this at least kind of made you think of what are some things I want to do every project when I get started. So I think we're out of time for questions, but I'm happy to talk to anyone up front. So, thank you.